Hello YouTube, LD50 here, back with another video, and today we're going to talk about a different build for melee Amara. I wanted to see if we could make a build that was viable at high mayhem levels that didn't rely on the blue tree or rush stacks, and I also wanted to see if it would be viable for weapons other than the Facepuncher. So what we have here is we have ourselves a Psych Stabber, which is a regular gun that has a large melee bonus multiplier on it. So we'll have a look at the gear and the skills, we'll do some combat, and we'll wrap it up at the end and see how the build goes. So this build will work with a Facepuncher, and for the most part it will work with a Psych Stabber. The Psych Stabber, as you can see on the card there, has a 340% melee multiplier, which is a large increase to melee damage, but it is a regular gun. It shoots regular bullets, so if you have a moral objection to using the Facepuncher, which is a gun that shoots melee damage, you can use the Psych Stabber with this build. However, what I would say is this isn't the probably the most optimum gun to use for large single targets, large bosses, but in a mobbing situation it's perfectly viable. We'll talk about the gear build and then we'll go and do a bit of combat so you can see both the Psych Stabber and the Facepuncher and see the difference between them. As with my other melee builds, we're going to be relying on the Frozen Heart. The Frozen Heart deals cryo damage as a Nova, and that Nova will freeze enemies solid. Frozen enemies take bonus melee damage, and also this particular shield synergizes well with one of the skills that we're going to be using. Again, as in previous videos, we're going to be using a grenade with an action skill end elemental damage anointment. We're going to be using a elemental stone white elephant, and we're going to be using the breaker com. And the reason we're going to use the breaker com is we're going to be abusing jab cross and the jab cross combat loop, which we'll talk about in a moment. Try to find one with a single point into find your center and as many points as you can get into jab cross to give you the most amount of damage. So skill wise, we have not put any points into the blue tree. If you've seen some of my previous melee builds for Amara, you will know that we have always traditionally spec'd all the way down to avatar, but I wanted to see if we could avoid doing that, avoid using rush stacks. That's one of the reasons why we're not using the phase Zerker com, because we're not relying on rush stacks for the damage. And we're going to use a different skill to try to get our action skill back quicker, and also be relying on our Guardian perk as well, which we'll touch on in a moment. So it's a red tree, green tree and purple tree build. On the red tree we want to be getting down as far as sustainment, which is in combination with infusion. Infusion adds action skill element to your weapons, so whichever weapon you use, the Psych Stabber or the Facepuncher, if you shoot it you should be able to get some lifesteal from sustainment. The other skills that are providing a lot of damage in the red tree are Illuminated Fist for the extra melee damage, and Tempest, which is boosting the elemental damage of the white elephant sticky bombs. The other skills that we've taken are more synergizing with the Facepuncher, so that would be Steady Hands to tighten up the shot, Dread to reload our weapon when enemies are killed whilst they're grasped, and Indiscriminate for the ricochet effect. We've put a couple of points into Wildfire to give us enough points to get down to where we need, and obviously taking a point in sustainment. Now the action skill that we're going to be using for the most part is Ties That Bind, and Ties That Bind gets the bonus from the 300 over 90 anointment that the either Psych Stabber or the Facepuncher has. That applies to the damage that is shared between the targets that are linked by Ties That Bind. So you grasp a target and it links to other targets in the area, and then it gets shared damage. On the green tree, we've gone down as far as Blitz for the extra melee damage. So the skills that are giving us boosts to our damage here are Arms Deal, giving us splash damage, Find Your Center, which is boosted by the com, giving us extra melee damage, Blitz, giving us a further 100% melee damage, and then Jab Cross. Now, the reason that Jab Cross is an interesting skill to use with a melee build, whenever Amara deals melee damage to an enemy, she gains increased action skill damage and increased gun damage for a few seconds. Well, ignore the gun damage for a moment, concentrate on the action skill damage. Boosted by this com, that's 135% boost to the action skill damage. Now that is going to boost the ties that bind damage. So we pick a target up, and the damage between them, that is on the link, will be boosted by Jab Cross and further boosted by ties that bind. And one thing to note with using ties that bind, it is better to apply, once you've grasped your target, it's better to apply the damage to the linked targets rather than the grasped targets. That seems to give more damage output. The other skills that we've taken in this tree are for survivability, so we've got clarity here for some extra health regeneration, helping hands for some damage reduction, a single point into root to rise to give us a little bit more health capacity, and mindfulness to give us a little bit more movement speed on the battlefield, and also to help with our shield regeneration, to get our shield back up quicker, so that we can proc the skill in our Guardian perk that will help us with our cooldown. Now obviously we haven't taken Avatar and we haven't taken Restless, so we don't have any skills in the blue tree that will help us get our action skill back quicker, and because of that we have taken Combo Breaker, which we'll speak about in just a moment. So in the purple tree, no mistakes in nature. When Amara inflicts a status effect on an enemy, she gains increased melee damage. So if we apply a dot, a status effect, damage over time, we will be increasing our melee damage. Heavy Rain is going to increase the splash damage from the White Elephant sticky bombs further. Ebb and Flow, when we kill an enemy with melee damage, a portion of the damage is dealt back as health, so it's a bit of life steal from melee. And Unweave the Rainbow. Now this is the skill that synergizes with the Frozen Heart. Amara deals bonus damage of her attuned element whenever she deals melee damage or splash damage, and that's a further bonus 33% damage. So when we activate our action skill, we're going to freeze the enemies in the surrounding area with the Nova from the Frozen Heart, and then those frozen enemies will proc Unweave the Rainbow, getting further melee damage and splash damage from this skill. And then finally, Combo Breaker. Combo Breaker is a skill which will give us a chance to reset the action skill cooldown. So instead of using Avatar, where we would normally be able to use our action skill twice, once whilst it was on cooldown, we're going to be using Combo Breaker to give us a 20% chance to reset our action skill. Now with Ties That Bind, we will be killing multiple enemies at the same time, so I believe that each enemy has a chance to proc Combo Breaker, so we should see in combat action our action skill come back nice and quickly. This is an end game build, so we want to be relying on Groundbreaker to some extent, but also we want to be relying on Topped Off. Topped Off will give us an increased action skill cooldown rate while our shields are full, and Shield Reboot and Emergency Response will help with that, as will Mindfulness. That will allow us to get our shield back a little bit quicker, which will allow us to proc Topped Off. We are going to play this on Mayhem 11 because I don't like the modifiers, so that's why we're going to have this switch to Mayhem 11. Obviously, if you prefer playing with the modifiers, you can do that. I just don't like them. So that is our build. I'll run through the skills quickly again. Oh, just to briefly touch, we are using Revelation as our augment. But it is a Ties That Bind build in the main, excepting when we go up against a single target like Grave Ward, where we'll change to a different action skill, and I'll touch on that when we get there. But our green tree here, our purple tree, nothing in the blue tree, and our red tree. And we're relying on the 300/90 anointment on our Psych Stabber or our Facepuncher to boost the damage from Ties That Bind. So what we'll do now is we'll pop over to Athenas and we'll see how this build gets on. I expect it to be viable. I don't expect it to be the best build. I would imagine that we would struggle against Captain Traunt with the Psych Stabber. I don't think we will struggle against Captain Traunt with the Facepuncher, but we'll try both weapons on Athenas and see what results we get, and then we'll pop off to Grave Ward, as I've said, and perform a kill on him. But I think in that instance we'll use the Facepuncher. So I will see you over at Athenas in a moment. Welcome back. Here we are at Athenas. We're going to run through probably the first two areas with the Psych Stabber, and then I'd imagine we'll move on to the Facepuncher. I'm not the best pure melee player, so expect me to have a few problems. In testing, I have found that I have had a few problems, but that's more down to my poor gamesmanship than it is the build. Let's get rid of that barrel. We need to get over to one of these enemies and apply a melee shot to it, pick it up, and try to bash one of the linked enemies. That was a badass enemy, so it had quite a bit of health. Let's try that again. And there you go. As you can see, the damage through Ties That Bind applies to all enemies, and it's better if you attack the enemy that is linked rather than the enemy that is grasped. There we go. Yeah, a little bit scrappy, but I'm not the best melee player in the world. Fairly straightforward, so yes, definitely viable. You can shoot the Psych Stabber to get a bit of health back using sustainment, but the main damage is coming from the melee shot itself. Right, we need a little bit of health back, so we'll shoot something to get some sustainment back. There we go. And we need to perform another melee attack to reset jab cross. I see. They're all dying anyway. Be careful of this barrel.
Anyone else want to try?
And there we go. One last enemy, which we should be able to dispatch. There we go. So, the first two areas taken care of with the Psych Stabber. I think I'm going to swap over to the Facepuncher for the next two areas. Playing pure melee is not my particular favourite, but I did want to demonstrate that this build is powerful enough to use as a full traditional melee build. But we'll proceed through the next two areas using the Facepuncher instead. Obviously, as you know, the Facepuncher deals melee damage, so we're still going to be able to activate jab cross. So we'll shoot once, pick up our enemy, obviously using the Facepuncher all the time. We will be able to proc sustainment and get life steal. And then we've got one more enemy hiding over here. There you go. So it is providing enough damage through the Facepuncher to one-shot these enemies without these white elephant sticky bombs proccing. We'll move up through the next area, and then we'll proceed on to Captain Traunt and give him a go, see how we fare against Captain Traunt with this build. Be careful of the barrels in this area. There we go, area cleared. Oh, another big bad heavy. And more explosions downing us there, but nonetheless we got back up again.
Maurice hears the sound of another heart breaking, a symphony to his listening ear.
Somebody shoot this one!
Successfully cleared that area. Obviously playing very aggressively here and not playing it safe at all.
Another broken heart. Maurice is searingly pleased.
I'll just top up our ammo and then we'll go and take on Captain Traunt. Right, so we will try with the Psych Stabber. It's my opinion that it probably won't be strong enough to deal with him in short order. But we'll see how we do. If not, we can swap over to the Facepuncher for a more guaranteed damage outcome. Obviously, once he spawns some enemies and we can get times that bind to activate, we're more likely to do more damage to him. But nonetheless, let's push forward. See if we can get up nice and close. Not an awful lot of damage there. We do have some enemies now. Let's see if we can get them activated. And I see, nope, managed to kill ourselves there. We'll swap over to the Facepuncher just to get ourselves back up again, and I think we'll finish him off with the Facepuncher. I think, in all honesty, the Psych Stabber is not the weapon to be used against large enemies like this. But nonetheless, we got the job done. So yes, in a mobbing situation, the Psych Stabber was perfectly viable, but against a large single target boss with this build, not so much. But we can obviously swap over and use the Facepuncher. As it deals melee damage, it will work perfectly well with this build. I think what we'll do now is we'll just nip over to Grave Ward. I'm probably going to change the weapon slightly and change the action skill, and the reason for that is we won't have ads to use to activate ties that bind, so I think we'll change over to Face Slam, and we'll change over to a Facepuncher with the Face Slam anointment, because then we can use Face Slam to activate that anointment and increase our damage. May swap over to the Brawler Ward shield as well, because that also gives us bonus melee damage when it is depleted. So I'll see you over at Grave Ward, and we'll see how we get on against him. Right, bye for now, see you in a bit. Welcome back. Here we are at Grave Ward. We've made a couple of adjustments to our gear, and we have changed our action skill, which I'll talk about now. So we have changed over to a Facepuncher that has the Face Slam weapon damage anointment. We have changed to a Brawler Ward with Face Slam melee damage is increased by 200% for a short time. So that is going to give us a 500% additive melee damage bonus. We're going to try to position ourselves to see if we can get Grave Ward to break the shield for us. It is a level 1 shield, so hopefully we can get it broken, in which case we'll get a further 300% melee damage additive bonus. We've changed over to a grenade that has got an action skill element of fire. We've changed over to a white elephant, and we have changed to Face Slam. That is to activate the anointment. So whilst the main part of this build we were using ties that bind, on this instance for a large single target like this, we're just using the action skill to proc the anointment. So that's why we've changed our gear over here. The other thing that I have will do is to disable shield reboot and emergency response, and the reason being is if we do manage to get our shield to break, then we don't want it to come back too quickly, because whilst it is depleted we will be getting this 300% melee damage bonus. We will jump down, we will ignore his first phase, and then we will perform the kill, and then we'll have a little recap of the skills. So we'll jump down first and ignore his initial phase, wait for him to present his arm, well, we've managed to get our shield to break there. We'll see if we can keep it down. We'll use our action skill, and there we go. We did manage to keep our shield down for long enough to get the bonus melee damage from the Brawler Ward shield, and the build itself, the skills, were sufficient to provide enough damage to kill Wotan in just a couple of shots there, as you can see. So we'll have a little bit of a recap of what we were talking about. So we were using a Psych Stabber, and we were using a 300 over 90 anointed Facepuncher for the main part of the combat. Obviously against the single target where we couldn't use ties that bind, we've changed our anointments slightly. But for the main part of the combat, we were using the Psych Stabber and the Facepuncher, both with the 300/90 anointment, because that was boosting our ties that bind. Obviously for this kill we used Face Slam, but for the main part of the video we were using ties that bind, like that. We were using a Frozen Heart for the main part, because frozen enemies will take bonus melee damage. We were using action skill end anointed elemental damage on the grenade, and an artifact called a White Elephant, the stone version with an elemental prefix. I think in the original bit of the video we were using radiation, but we changed to fire for Gravelord because he's weak to fire. So I believe that we were using the radiation stone there, and I believe we were using corrosive, I think, in the first part of the build. The skills we were using, obviously ties that bind for the main part of the build video, and then just for this particular single target kill we changed over to Face Slam. This is the red tree, this is the green tree, this is the purple tree, and no points in the blue tree. Our Guardian rank was on, and for the main part of the video we had shield reboot and emergency response enabled to help us with shield regen, but obviously for this kill we turned these off so that we didn't get the Brawler Ward to come back too quickly. We're playing on Mayhem 11. So I hope you've enjoyed this content and will consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. It does help me out to keep me motivated to make more videos. I would also suggest that you give the build a go, see if you like it. I think it's an interesting build, mostly because it doesn't rely on the blue tree and rush stacks, so it's not a rush stack build, it's not relying on avatar. I think it's been quite viable. As I said, I've yet to take it through the harder content in the game. It may not stand up to that, but we'll see. So watch the channel for future videos. If I do take this build through the Malawan takedown, I'll be sure to record it and to put a video up. So I've been LD50, you've been lovely, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.